The coffee smelled wrong. That was the first thing Lydia West noticed. Not the gold-rimmed plates, the cascading white hydrangeas, or the handmade cinnamon scones stacked like fragile art. Not the southern sun pouring in through the 12-foot windows of Celeste's restored Victorian estate on Willow Creek Lane. It wasn't even the cheerful clinking of silverware from the West family's monthly brunch. It was the smell, warm, bitter, strangely metallic. Grant, her husband of 3 years, smiled like everything was perfect. He set the mug in front of her with the same easy charm he used on clients and judges alike. "Brewed it myself, babe. It's a Costa Rican blend. Thought you'd enjoy something smooth." Lydia stared at the cup, her fingers curling around the porcelain, but she didn't lift it. Not yet. Celeste sat across the table in her signature blush-pink blazer, legs crossed, espresso in hand, her gaze never leaving Lydia. "You look exhausted, Lyd," she said, voice dripping in faux concern. "Have you been sleeping?" "Sure," Lydia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just running a lot of strategy reviews this week." Celeste nodded, sipped, and tilted her head in that trademark calculating way, somewhere between supportive and stalking prey. The coffee still sat untouched. A breeze blew through the open French doors, carrying with it the scent of roses from the backyard garden. Lydia used to love that garden. Grant built it for her the first year they moved to Savannah. Back when everything felt solid. Back when she believed in birthdays and family brunches and little gestures like specialty coffee blends made with love. Back before she ended up in urgent care 3 different times after eating at Celeste's house. Once, it was bad shrimp. Another time, an allergy reaction to some imported tea. The third, they blamed the flu. All of them spaced just far enough apart to not seem connected. All of them happening right before key presentations, high-stakes meetings, or investor calls Lydia had worked months to prepare. Coincidences? Maybe. But Lydia had long stopped believing in those. "You're not drinking," Grant said, his voice still light, but his eyes a beat too attentive. "It's still hot." Lydia's stomach twisted. He was watching her too closely. "You know I usually prefer iced coffee," she said, carefully adjusting her tone. "Breaking tradition today?" He chuckled. "Hey, Celeste and I tried this one last night. It's got a nice kick to it. Smooth but strong." Lydia glanced at Celeste again. Her sister-in-law's smile widened a touch. She placed her espresso cup down slowly, not taking another sip. There were 3 cups of coffee on the table, one untouched, Heron, and both of them knew it. Lydia offered a light laugh, reaching down into her handbag as if searching for her phone. Her fingers brushed the edge of a voice recorder buried under a compact and a spare charger. Celeste leaned forward, her chin in her hand. "You've really been running on empty lately, haven't you? You should take some time off. Recharge." Take some time off, right. Lydia's firm, Holloway & Burke, was weeks away from sealing a multi-million-dollar renewable energy partnership with East Coast Gas. She was the lead strategist, the point person. The deal didn't happen without her, and last week, Grant had casually suggested she let someone else carry the ball for once. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now she did. Grant was a charming man with a clean jawline, expensive tastes, and a razor-sharp instinct for opportunity. He hadn't always been like this. He used to bring her lunch during late-night work sessions and rub her shoulders while she reviewed client portfolios. But the moment she started getting more recognition than him, something shifted, something cold and ugly. He hated being second. "Mind if I use your study for a second, Celeste?" Lydia asked suddenly, standing and holding her phone like she'd just received an urgent message. "Of course," Celeste said too quickly. As Lydia passed her chair, she stumbled, just enough to bump the table. "Oh gosh, sorry," she exclaimed, steadying the silver napkin holder. She leaned forward to realign the mugs. In that brief, graceful motion, she switched her cup with Celeste's. Swift, silent, a motion practiced in her mind for weeks. She saw the flicker in Celeste's eyes. Just a blink. No words. Lydia disappeared into the hallway toward the study, her pulse pounding in her ears. Her hand trembled as she left the door slightly ajar and opened her recording app, just in time to hear footsteps and soft murmurs behind her. Then silence. Then, Celeste sipping. 1, 2, 10 seconds. Nothing. 15. Then, Grant. Celeste's voice, thin and sharp. My throat. It's burning. Lydia stepped out of the study slowly, phone recording in hand, heart steady. Not feeling well, Celeste? She asked, her voice calm, but her stare like steel. Celeste's skin turned ashy, her eyes wide with panic. That wasn't... You said it would only make her drowsy, Celeste wheezed, clutching her stomach. Grant stood frozen, face pale. That wasn't her cup, he whispered. And just like that, it slipped. The truth. Lydia's voice sharpened. How'd you know it wasn't her cup, Grant? She hadn't even said anything yet. The air went still. The game was over. But Lydia's war had only just begun. The moment Lydia stepped into the hallway and left the study door ajar, she could feel it in her bones. This was more than suspicion now. It was action. The kind of moment people call gut instinct. But for Lydia, it was proof born of trauma. She'd been gaslit too many times to ignore her inner voice. And now, that voice was calm, focused, and deadly clear. You're not crazy. They're trying to get rid of you. From her narrow vantage point, Lydia watched it unfold like a suspense movie in slow motion. Celeste lifted the mug, the one Lydia had just switched, and took a tentative sip. Then another. Grant was too distracted scrolling his phone to notice anything out of place. 10 seconds passed. Nothing. Then came the twitch. Celeste's lips tightened. Her throat convulsed once. Her fingers trembled against the delicate porcelain cup. Lydia's hand clenched around her phone, her thumb steady on the recording button. She wasn't panicked. She was prepared. Across the table, Grant looked up. His smile fell. Celeste? He asked, alarm bleeding into his voice. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. It's burning, she whispered, her voice hoarse. My throat. Something's wrong. And that's when the mask fell off completely. Grant dropped his phone. What the hell? Celeste? Celeste looked up at him in horror, sweat already forming at her brow. You said it would only make her tired. You said she'd sleep through the weekend, not this. Lydia stepped out of the study, slow and deliberate, like a witness emerging from the shadows in a courtroom drama. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Not feeling well, Celeste? She asked, eyes flicking to the woman doubled over in pain. Celeste gasped, her face paling further. You switched the cups. Lydia's tone was ice. After 3 hospital visits, you really thought I wouldn't notice the pattern? The birthday brunch? The detox tea? The cinnamon muffins on my client launch day? Grant turned to Lydia, his mouth parting, trying to calculate what lie might still work. You don't understand, he blurted. This isn't what it looks like. Lydia didn't blink. Then how did you know it wasn't her cup before she said anything? Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that blanketed the room like a fog. In that instant, the whole scheme cracked open. Lydia raised her phone, the screen showing the red recording icon. Smile. You're both on tape. Celeste let out a strangled cry, slumping forward. Call an ambulance. Grant lunged for his phone. I didn't know. I didn't think she'd drink the wrong one. You knew exactly what was in that coffee. Lydia cut in, already dialing 911. The dispatcher picked up. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at 1227 Willow Creek Lane, Lydia said, voice steady, heart racing. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction after drinking something that may have been tampered with. She's shaking and vomiting. Send paramedics. Fast. She hung up and turned her phone camera toward the 2 people who had once been her family. Grant knelt beside Celeste, his hands fluttering helplessly, eyes wide with fear. Not for her, but for himself. You planned this, Lydia said, her voice low. You both did. I just wanted her out of the way for the weekend, Grant shouted. You've been stealing every project. Every client goes to you. Lydia laughed bitterly. Stealing? I earned every win while you played husband of the year and poisoned my damn tea. Sirens wailed in the distance. It wouldn't be long now. Celeste moaned, curled on the tile floor, her carefully curated elegance reduced to a crumpled mess. Lydia looked down at her, not with pity, but with the quiet triumph of someone who had waited far too long for justice to come knocking. "This is what a sweet revenge looks like," she whispered. "Not with rage, not with violence, just truth and evidence." The front door burst open. Paramedics rushed in. "Over here!" Lydia called out. "She drank something toxic. I have reason to believe it was intentional." They surrounded Celeste. One paramedic turned to Lydia. "Are you family?" Lydia's lips twitched into something between a smile and a smirk. "I was." As they lifted Celeste onto a stretcher, Lydia noticed Grant trying to slip away toward the front hall. "Don't bother," she said, blocking his path. "They'll be asking you questions next." His mouth opened, but no words came. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a calculated act, an attempted takedown, cloaked in brunch and fake kindness. A textbook case of family betrayal disguised as love. Lydia followed the medics outside, the Georgia sun blazing overhead. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't even angry anymore. She was finally in control. And she wasn't done yet. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. Lydia sat in a vinyl chair outside the ER room, her legs crossed tightly, one heel bouncing as sirens faded into the distance. She stared at the white tile floor like it owed her answers. Her phone, still warm from recording everything at the brunch table, rested in her palm. Room 214. That's where they'd taken Celeste. Lydia replayed it all in her mind. The trembling hand, the seizing muscles, the moment Grant's face drained of color when he realized the switch. He hadn't panicked because Celeste was hurting. He panicked because the plan had backfired. The wrong woman had taken the hit. A nurse stepped into the hallway, clipboard in hand. "Miss West? She's awake, asking for you." Lydia rose, her spine straight, chin lifted. No fear now, only purpose. The room was dim, the overhead light turned low. Machines beeped steadily, tubes running to IVs, oxygen monitors clinging to pale skin. Celeste looked half her usual self, no heels, no blazer, no flawless makeup, just a woman stripped of her shields. "I didn't think you'd come," Celeste rasped. Lydia remained standing, arms crossed. "After you tried to take me out of the picture 4 times in 6 months? Yeah, I figured I deserved to hear you admit it. One last time." Celeste tried to sit up but winced. "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it?" Lydia's voice was sharp. "Let me guess, you didn't mean for me to end up in urgent care? You just wanted me to take a nap?" Celeste looked away. "You don't understand. Try me." Celeste exhaled shakily. "I worked 12 years to become partner. I earned my way up, one impossible client at a time. Then you show up, new blood, fast talker, polished deck, and suddenly every pitch is yours. I didn't even get a chance to breathe before they were handing you the Brentwood project. So you tried to poison me." "I didn't want to kill you," she said quietly. "Just slow you down. Keep you from showing up, from outshining me again. Grant, he said if you missed a few presentations, the board would start leaning toward us. You were overworked anyway. We thought we were helping you step back." Lydia's eyes went cold. "Helping? You two drugged me with some untraceable compound to help my career?" Celeste didn't answer. Lydia reached into her purse and pulled out her secondary phone, the one she kept hidden in a drawer at home. She opened the folder labeled Silverlight. Inside, 17 voice memos, 24 screenshots, and a spreadsheet tracking every medical incident, date, and suspected trigger. Each entry was color-coded, every detail logged like an investigative report. "You started slipping up in February," Lydia said. "Remember when I collapsed during the core bridge pitch? Grant had my full notes memorized. The board credited him as the lead, even though he just parroted my script." Celeste's eyes widened slightly. "That night," Lydia continued, "I found a small sugar packet in my purse. No label. tucked into the lunch Grant packed for me. I didn't say anything, but from that moment on, I started collecting. Lydia scrolled. Look, March 11th, stomach cramps. April 3rd, dizziness before the Harper review. May 27th, allergic rash after your homemade berry tart. Celeste's voice cracked. I didn't know he was using the real stuff. The first few times it was just herbs and teas. Then it escalated. A knock interrupted them. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Miss West? Lydia turned. We have results from the tox screen, the doctor said. There were traces of a compound in Ms. Harper's, she corrected herself, Celeste's blood, something experimental. It's used in cognitive testing, not approved for general use. Lydia narrowed her eyes. What would have happened if I drank the full dose? The doctor hesitated. Given your medical history, possibly a cardiac event, worst case respiratory failure, the dosage she ingested was high. Celeste buried her face in her hands. I want this formally reported, Lydia said. I've got the evidence, recordings, logs, even a confession. We've already contacted the police, the doctor replied. They're on their way now. We'll need to begin a full investigation. As the doctor left, Lydia turned back to Celeste. I trusted you, she said. You were supposed to be family. Celeste looked up, tears in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You teamed up with my husband to remove me from the room, not once, not twice, repeatedly, because I did my job better. It was jealousy, Celeste admitted, voice barely above a whisper. You made it look so easy. Lydia gave a bitter laugh. Easy? You have no idea the hours I put in, the nights I skipped sleep to refine strategy decks. I gave you credit on the Harper project. I offered you a co-lead on Lakeshore. I never tried to take the spotlight. You just couldn't share it. Celeste blinked back fresh tears. The door opened again. A uniformed officer entered with a nurse. Celeste Harper? The officer asked. We're beginning an investigation into a suspected attempt to cause bodily harm. We'll need your full cooperation. Celeste nodded weakly. Lydia didn't gloat. She didn't speak. She just stepped back, letting the officer through. As they began paperwork, Celeste turned her head and murmured one final thing. Don't trust anyone, not even the ones who share your bed. Lydia's jaw clenched. That was the line that hit the deepest. Not the confession, not the tears, that warning. Because now, Lydia knew the betrayal hadn't ended at the brunch table. Grant wasn't done, and neither was she. She stepped into the hallway and dialed her lawyer, voice steady and full of steel. I've got what we need, she said. I'm ready to burn this thing down. Lydia sat in the back seat of her rideshare car, staring out the window as Savannah's historic streets blurred past. Oak trees with trailing Spanish moss waved in the early evening breeze, and families walked their dogs along brick sidewalks. Normal life moved on, oblivious to the storm unraveling just beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed. It was Jared. She answered immediately. You at your desk? Just pulled up your email, he said, his voice clipped, focused. You weren't exaggerating. This isn't just a jealous in-law situation. This is sustained, premeditated manipulation and attempted harm. I told you, Lydia said, her tone flat. They didn't just try to sabotage a meeting. They orchestrated a months-long campaign to remove me from my own life. I'm contacting a private investigator and a toxicologist, Jared said. We need to trace the compound. If it's lab grade, someone had to source it illegally. I have a lead on that, Lydia replied. Grant was a research assistant at Baylor back in grad school. He stayed in touch with a guy named Jonathan Matthews who now works at a pharmaceutical startup in Austin, Canarix Pharma. They specialize in neurochemical compounds for behavioral testing. Good, Jared said. Document everything. Don't talk to Grant. And whatever you do, don't confront him yet. Let's catch him clean. The car stopped in front of her house, a colonial-style brick two-story in a quiet neighborhood. It used to be a symbol of achievement. Now it felt like enemy territory. She stepped inside, keys jangling as she closed the door. The living room was spotless. A bottle of Pinot sat open on the counter. Grant was lounging on the leather sectional, scrolling through his phone, the picture of comfort. "You're back," he said, not looking up. "How's Celeste?" Lydia didn't answer. She walked straight to the office, locked the door behind her, and booted up her laptop. The screen glowed to life. On it, the shared files Jared had already accessed, plus Lydia's newest additions, a screen recording of the brunch audio, dated incident logs, and the voice memo Grant left on the baby monitor 2 weeks ago, thinking she was asleep. She clicked play. Grant's voice crackled through the speaker. Last time wasn't strong enough. She still showed up to the pitch like nothing happened. Jonathan's voice, cold and practical. "You'll need a higher dose. She's building tolerance. Make sure it's delivered 3 to 4 hours before the event. Add to liquid. Don't heat it. That alters the compound." Lydia paused the recording, bile rising in her throat. They'd turned her into a science experiment, and they hadn't cared if it ruined her body or her life. She opened a secure folder labeled Obsidian. Inside, every receipt, every text, every calendar entry she'd tracked since the first accident. She highlighted 3 entries. February 14th, collapsed in boardroom. Grant presented in her place. March 6th, violent nausea hours before CoreGen meeting. Celeste brought her a smoothie. May 19th, missed flight to D.C. for funding summit. Grant changed her alarm time and offered tea to help her sleep. Every dot connected. Lydia clicked share and sent the full folder to Jared. Within minutes, her phone rang. "This is no longer just a family issue," Jared said. "This qualifies as criminal conspiracy, collusion, medical harm, misuse of controlled substances. I've seen fewer red flags in RICO cases." "Then let's make it official." "Working on it. I've already contacted Savannah PD's white-collar crimes unit and forwarded this to a specialist who handles pharmaceutical abuse. But you need to stay calm, Lydia. Grant's clever. If he even suspects you're onto him." "I'm not scared of him anymore," Lydia said quietly. She wasn't. Not now. She opened another tab, a live video from her home office camera. She hit record. Her voice was steady, her expression resolute. "My name is Lydia West," she began. "Over the past 6 months, I've been repeatedly poisoned, manipulated, and psychologically targeted by my husband, Grant West, and his sister, Celeste Harper." She laid it all out. Every incident, every recorded phrase, every trace of slow, calculated manipulation. She ended the video with a line she hadn't planned to say, but meant with every cell in her body. "I don't want revenge. I want the truth to win. I want them to face what they did, not just to me but to anyone they ever tried to silence." She saved the video, encrypted it, and emailed a backup copy to a secure drive. By the time she emerged from the office, Grant was in the kitchen reheating dinner. "You look tense," he said casually. Lydia smiled. "Just a lot on my mind. We should talk with a lawyer soon, though, about splitting our company shares. We're too tied together." Grant turned slowly. "That's sudden." "I've been thinking about it," she said smoothly. "We're both ambitious. Sometimes that gets messy." He studied her for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're different." "I'm tired," she replied, "and clarity tends to come with exhaustion." He nodded, said nothing. She walked past him, her heart hammering, but her face unreadable. That night, Lydia didn't sleep much. She scrolled through her notes, reading back the exact moment she knew, really knew, they were trying to erase her. It wasn't the stomach cramps, or the memory fog, or the violent vomiting. It was the brunch 2 months ago when Celeste said, "I read over your report while you were recovering. It's amazing how much your style has matured." Lydia had never shared that report. That was the day she started planning her escape. Now she wasn't just escaping. She was building the case to take them down. As the clock struck midnight, her inbox pinged with an update from Jared. A search warrant had been issued. Authorities would be visiting Grant's law firm the next morning. Lydia smiled for the first time in weeks. This wasn't about bitterness. This was about survival, about proving that no matter how pretty the packaging, manipulation was still evil, and she wasn't going to let it win. The courthouse in downtown Savannah loomed like a cathedral of reckoning, columns tall and cold, its heavy wooden doors swallowing every footstep with the weight of unfinished stories. Lydia stood at the front steps, blazer pressed, eyes locked ahead as reporters snapped photos from a respectful distance. Her attorney, Jared Wells, walked beside her with the calm of a man who had seen darker cases and won. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. On the left side of the gallery sat Lydia, surrounded by her closest allies, her mother, a few loyal colleagues, and a silent observer from the Henderson Group, the very client nearly stolen from her by her own husband. On the defense side sat Grant West and Celeste Harper. Grant looked the same, clean-shaven, composed, expensive suit, but Lydia could see the tightness in his jaw, the way he kept rubbing his thumb over his wedding band like a nervous tick. Celeste, by contrast, looked almost gaunt. Pale, drawn, no trace of the woman who used to plan themed brunches and hand out scented thank-you notes. Her mask had slipped, and all that was left was exhaustion and guilt. When the bailiff called, "All rise," Lydia didn't flinch. The judge, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, entered and took her seat. The prosecutor began. "This case," he said, addressing the jury, "is not simply about marital issues. It's not about jealousy or family drama. It is about a calculated conspiracy, a long-term effort to incapacitate, manipulate, and replace a professional woman by the people closest to her, her husband and her sister-in-law." He clicked a remote, and a screen lowered in the corner of the room. A video played. Lydia's face filled the screen, calm, focused, deliberate. "My name is Lydia West," the recorded voice said. "Over the last 6 months, I have been deliberately poisoned and psychologically manipulated by my husband, Grant West, and his sister, Celeste Harper." The courtroom held its breath. As the recording continued, showing her evidence logs, audio snippets, and screenshots of texts between Grant and Celeste discussing dosage and timing, the jury's faces changed, from curiosity to shock to barely concealed anger. Grant shifted in his seat. Celeste stared at the floor. Jared stood and handed the judge a printed transcript. "Exhibit B," he said. "Text exchange from March 18th. Make sure she drinks the tea by 9. That should keep her down through mid-afternoon. I'll handle the client call. You just show up at 3 to deliver the handoff." The judge nodded. Admitted. The prosecution continued layering the evidence. Lydia's hospital records showing traces of unapproved neurocompounds, the audio from brunch where Grant confessed that wasn't her cup, and the hidden recording of him speaking to Jonathan Matthews at Canarix Pharma. Matthews himself, now under federal investigation, had provided a statement under immunity, confirming that Grant had asked for a mild cognition suppressant that could be mixed into food or drink. On the second day of the trial, Dr. Elena Bronner took the stand. "As Lydia's attending physician during 2 of her ER visits," she explained, "I noted an alarming consistency in her symptoms: dizziness, memory lapses, severe fatigue, and gastrointestinal distress. We initially believed it was stress-related." "Was it?" the prosecutor asked. Dr. Bronner shook her head. Upon reviewing her toxicology reports against the compound list from Canarix Pharma, it became clear these were deliberate exposures. The agent was adjusted in dosage over time, indicating someone was monitoring her responses and altering delivery accordingly. Lydia closed her eyes for a brief second. She felt vindicated, yes, but also sick. These weren't just isolated acts of sabotage. They were trials, tests, as if her life had become some twisted lab experiment managed by people she once shared dinners and laughter with. On the third day, Jared called Celeste to the stand. She looked thinner than ever in a pale blouse, her hands visibly shaking. "I don't deny it," she said quietly. "I wish I could, but it's all true. I was part of it. I let my jealousy make me into someone I don't even recognize anymore." "Why did you do it?" Jared asked. Celeste hesitated, then looked at Lydia for the first time since the trial began. "Because she made everything look effortless. Clients loved her. She won every account. And I felt invisible. Then Grant said, "What if she just needed rest? What if we took the pressure off her shoulders for a while?" And I believed him. "So you gave her poisoned drinks?" Celeste's voice broke. "Yes." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jared turned to the judge. "We rest our case." The defense tried to counter. Grant's attorney painted him as protective, claiming he was trying to help Lydia manage her stress, that he never intended harm, and had simply taken bad advice. But when the prosecution replayed his own voice from a phone recording, "Double the dose. Make sure she's out by noon. If she misses the Henderson call, the fallback goes to us." The jury's patience snapped. On the final day of trial, Lydia was called to the stand. She wore a navy dress. Her voice was clear. "I didn't ask to become the face of this firm. I didn't lobby for recognition. I just showed up early, stayed late, and gave my best. I loved my husband. I trusted my family. And they turned that love into a weapon." She paused. Her voice tightened. "There's a moment when betrayal stops being personal and becomes dangerous. That moment came the first time I couldn't feel my fingers and nearly collapsed in traffic after drinking Celeste's herbal immunity tea. I still don't know how I got home." A hushed silence blanketed the courtroom. "I'm not here for revenge," she finished. "I'm here for justice. I want to live in a world where women can succeed without being targeted by the very people who should be cheering them on." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, no one breathed. The judge stood. "On all counts, conspiracy to inflict bodily harm, use of unregulated substances, and criminal endangerment, we find the defendants guilty." Lydia didn't flinch. The sentence came next. "Grant West, you are hereby sentenced to 18 years in state prison. Celeste Harper, 12 years. Neither sentence is eligible for probation." Celeste cried openly. Grant stared straight ahead, unmoving. Lydia closed her eyes, not in triumph, but in relief. Outside, the press surged forward. Lydia said nothing. She got in Jared's car, turned her phone on silent, and watched the courthouse shrink behind her in the rearview mirror. Inside her bag was a copy of the sentencing document, unopened. She didn't need to read it. Justice had been served. A year had passed since the verdict, but Lydia West still woke up some mornings half expecting to find herself lying in a hospital bed, wondering what she'd eaten, or who had handed her the glass. But now, when she opened her eyes, she saw the gentle gray walls of her new apartment, high above the city lights of downtown Atlanta. Hardwood floors, mid-century furniture, framed art she'd picked out herself. Peace lived here. She had sold the house on Maplehurst Lane 2 weeks after the trial ended. She didn't want the memories. Not the guest room where Celeste once stayed. Not the kitchen where Grant brewed his little morning surprises. She didn't even want the yard they'd landscaped together. "This is your clean break," her lawyer had said as they signed the final property transfer. He wasn't wrong. The new place was all hers, designed from scratch, chosen with care, no ghosts, no traps. Just quiet, and air she could breathe. On a warm Friday evening, Lydia stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a steaming mug of chamomile tea. No more bitter blends, no more second-guessing every flavor. She had bought the kettle herself, boiled the water herself, chose every ingredient. No one else had touched it. The city below buzzed with movement. Taxis zipped through traffic. Lights blinked across the skyline. Somewhere down there, a younger version of herself was still hustling, still believing that success could be shared with the people you loved. That version of Lydia had died slowly, not all at once. First with the detox tea, then with the allergy accident. Then with every moment Grant looked her in the eye and said, "You're just tired, babe. You work too hard." She had never worked too hard. She had just worked honestly, and that had threatened them. Now she worked differently. After the trial, she left her previous firm, Holloway and Burke. They had supported her publicly, but behind closed doors there were whispers, boardroom glances, half-phrased questions about whether she'd been in too deep with her husband's affairs. Even success couldn't silence all doubt. And Lydia wasn't willing to fight for validation she didn't need. Instead, she took the offer from Henderson Group, the very client her husband had tried to steal. They didn't just give her a title, they gave her freedom. Regional Strategy Director, Southeast Division. Her team managed over $100 million in client contracts across clean energy, biotech, and consumer goods. And for the first time in years, Lydia felt unshaken in a meeting room. She no longer had to wonder if the man beside her was rooting for her or plotting her downfall. Every proposal was hers, every win earned. No hidden strings, no sabotage. 1 month into her new role, she led the pitch for a luxury skincare brand partnership, Lyric Skin, a $12 million deal. She walked in with her chin high, her numbers sharp, and her strategy airtight. They signed in 3 days. 3 months later, she won the Breakthrough Strategy Award at the National Marketing Conference in Chicago. Her acceptance speech was short, gracious, but firm. And then, 8 months after the trial, Lydia was elected to the executive board of the American Marketing Association. No interviews, no talk shows, no book deals. She didn't sell her story. She didn't have to. Her story had already spoken for itself, in spreadsheets, pitches, trial transcripts, and closed deals. The only audience she needed was the one in the boardroom. The only revenge she wanted was success without bitterness. Because revenge, she now understood, was just another form of being chained to the past. Resilience meant choosing something different. It meant walking through hell and building something beautiful afterward. It was that thought that carried her onto the stage at the Charleston Women in Leadership Summit 1 year to the week since the sentencing. Hundreds of executives, entrepreneurs, and creatives filled the elegant conference hall. Lydia stood center stage, lights warm against her shoulders, mic in hand. Her hair was longer now, her suit was midnight blue. "My name is Lydia West," she began, "and I want to talk to you about storms, the kind that don't just knock you over, but try to erase you." She let the silence sit. "A year ago, I walked out of a courtroom with a win in the legal sense, but what I carried with me wasn't victory. It was a heart so bruised I wasn't sure it could ever beat without flinching again." A pause. Faces leaned forward. "I had to relearn what it meant to trust, to work, to lead, and above all, to stand in a room full of people and not wonder which one might hand me a drink I couldn't survive." She smiled, but it wasn't bitter. "It's easy to confuse survival with success, but survival is just step one. Real success comes when you build a new life and decide not to let fear live in it." The applause started soft, then grew. Lydia didn't bask in it. She nodded, quiet and grateful. Later that night, back in her apartment, she kicked off her heels and stepped onto the balcony, letting the warm spring air brush her face. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject: Lyric Skin Contract Extension. Message: renewed. Additional $15 million scope approved. Congratulations. She laughed out loud, half joy, half disbelief. Then she noticed a second message. From Henderson's CEO. "Thank you for not giving up. You're not just a top strategist. You're a reminder of what resilience looks like in a world that often rewards deception." Lydia put the phone down and leaned on the railing. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed. And for the first time in a long while, the sound didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a new beginning. Not once did she wonder where Grant or Celeste were now. She'd received the official sentencing documents, of course. Jared had forwarded them. She'd never opened the file. She didn't need to. They were behind her, far behind. They had taken her trust, her health, nearly her career, but not her integrity, and not her future. The rain came down softly over Atlanta, a quiet hush that muted the usual city hum. Lydia West stood barefoot in her apartment, a towel wrapped loosely around her hair, chamomile tea steeping beside her laptop. She had just returned from a Pilates class and a lunch meeting with Henderson's senior legal team. Routine things, ordinary things. It was the ordinariness that felt like a miracle. Because a year ago, she would have questioned the tea. A year ago, she would have studied every expression across the table, wondered what was laced beneath a compliment, what scheme hid behind a smile. But now, she didn't flinch. She didn't brace for betrayal, because her life was hers again. She opened her inbox. Among the usual client updates and team reports was a brief, unexpected email from her attorney, Jared. Subject line: "You should see this." Attachment: a redacted transcript from the final Canarix Pharma investigation. Lydia clicked. A few paragraphs in, she found what mattered. Further review of company emails confirms that Jonathan Matthews provided Kyle Carson and Celeste Harper with access to unauthorized neurological agents in exchange for undisclosed compensation. Kyle Carson's emails revealed a documented plan titled Obsidian, 6-month reduction protocol. Obsidian. That was her folder name, the one she created to document the abuse. It hadn't been a coincidence. They had named the plan after it, mocked her, thought they were clever. Lydia shut her laptop. That chapter was done. That war was over. She stepped out onto the balcony with her tea. Below, the city glowed beneath slick pavement and golden streetlights. Horns honked, laughter echoed, but up here, everything was still. Her kind of still. A knock at the door pulled her back inside. She opened it to find Danielle, one of the new associates at Henderson, fresh out of grad school, sharp-eyed and earnest. "Hey, sorry to just show up," Danielle said, holding a notebook and a coffee she'd clearly grabbed in a hurry. "I saw you speak last year at the Charleston Summit. It changed everything for me." Lydia smiled, surprised but warm. "Come in." Shoes off by the door, reins tracking in. Danielle slipped off her heels and followed Lydia into the kitchen. "I've been offered a lead position in D.C., Danielle said, shifting nervously, "and I don't know if I'm ready. They want someone who can stand firm in tough rooms, someone who knows how to protect themselves without becoming cold. And I remembered what you said, that strength isn't about retaliation, it's about clarity." Lydia poured another cup of tea. "You want advice?" Danielle nodded. "Here it is," Lydia said. "Courage isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the decision you make when no one's watching. It's saying, 'No, I don't need to strike back. I just need to stand where the truth is.' That's integrity, and it's your best protection." Danielle's eyes welled up. She blinked fast and stood. "Thank you. Seriously. I think I just needed someone to say it." Lydia walked her to the door. Before Danielle left, she turned and added, "I hope one day I can be someone else's calm in the chaos." "You already are," Lydia said. "That's why they want you." After she left, Lydia sat at the window, sipping her tea. The world had not softened, but she had grown harder in the right places. Not bitter, not closed off, just strong where she used to be porous. She had been betrayed by the people who knew her deepest weaknesses, but she hadn't responded with venom. She'd responded with proof, with structure, with law. She'd let the truth do the talking. And now she was thriving, not because she'd crushed her enemies, but because she had refused to become like them. The old her might have wanted vengeance. She might have fantasized about watching Grant's world fall apart piece by piece. But the woman she'd become? She didn't need to watch. She didn't even need to know. She was too busy building something better. 1 year and 2 months after the trial, Lydia stood at the podium of the National Ethics in Leadership Forum, hosted in Denver. She'd been invited to give the closing keynote, something she never would have imagined accepting 2 years ago. But here she was, black suit, natural curls loose over her shoulders, a room of 600 professionals watching her with pens in hand, ready to write down whatever wisdom she dropped. She didn't script this one. She spoke from the gut. "I've learned something about integrity," she began. "It's not just about doing the right thing when it's hard. It's about doing the right thing when doing the wrong thing would feel a hell of a lot better." The room laughed softly. "But I didn't choose the quiet path because I'm noble. I chose it because I've seen what bitterness does. I've seen what manipulation, jealousy, and ego can build, and how fast it can burn down everything you think you've earned." She scanned the room, her voice rising with steady conviction. "Integrity doesn't always win quickly, but it wins clean, and it doesn't leave you waking up in the middle of the night wondering who you've become." A standing ovation followed. Lydia didn't cry. She'd done all her crying already. She just smiled, shook hands, and walked off stage feeling something she hadn't in a long time. Free. Later that evening, back in her hotel suite, Lydia received a final email from Jared. No subject line, no dramatic phrasing, just a PDF attachment titled, "Case Closed, Harper West Final Summary." She didn't open it. She deleted it. Because she didn't need it. Her story wasn't there. It was in the contracts she signed, the teams she mentored, the nights she fell asleep without fear, and the mornings she woke up without doubt. She had chosen integrity, and in doing so, she had chosen herself. Lydia's story reminds us that strength isn't always loud, and justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits silently in the decisions we make every day, to stand firm, to speak clearly, to move forward without looking back. What would you have done in her place? Would you have chosen revenge or integrity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and follow for more powerful stories of courage, justice, and second chances.